Hemmings, and welcome back to Paleo to Pioneer and our long overdue 13th episode of Small Batch Science. I'm going off a little premature here to tell some tales, but it's timely too, because today is August 29th, 2025, the 98th anniversary of what you see in the picture on the cover of Dave Meltzer's book, the in-place discovery, in situ discovery of the Folsom Point and the bison bones at Folsom, New Mexico. The site affectionately known as, I think it's Union County now, but it was Colfax, so it's 29CX1. And the in-place discovery was, I believe, the fourth point found. That is cribbing from Jeb Taylor's wonderful book that we'll show in a moment, because it's got the first 4 points found really well illustrated. Meltzer is really the guy for Folsom, the site, and has a wonderful volume, but there's a lot of stuff that's not in here, and there's things that would add to it and things that are just flat out wrong, and we're going to address that first. Because, and for the life of me I could not find my copy of The Great Taos Bank Robbery or the Folsom story that he published in '71. The Great Taos Bank Robbery is a collection of short stories Tony Hillerman did in 1973. There's an awesome audio book of it, I think, that you can get on YouTube. If I can find a link, I'll put it in below, above the comments, because hearing the story in his voice is the best. It's about George McJunkin and the 1908 discovery and subsequent advocation and criticism of the site and even of the people. And the primary critic was this guy, Alice Hrdlicka, shown in a press photo from 1932, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But on this day, August 29th, 1927, finding this point in place between the ribs of an extinct form of bison really is a bit of a watershed moment in American archaeology, but it's arguably not even the most important thing that happened in New Mexico that day, because the first Pecos conference began out at where A.B. Kidder was excavating at the Pecos Pueblo. And they're instantly related incidents, because a number of telegrams were sent out by Figgins and Cook. As we approach the century in 2027, I'll get more into this. I'm chasing down some pieces right now, and I have a lot more to say about Folsom. I'm not ready to say, but I'll mention what I'm going to talk about and then come back to it. But I made a quick list of the people that I know off the top of my head got or received telegrams from the site saying, here, we have it in place, we haven't moved it, which was not the case the year before, and I don't have a copy of that point. But there was a tip found that got moved, and that wasn't good enough, even though they could kind of see where the imprint was in the sediment. Telegrams were sent, of course, to A.B. Kidder. I don't know if Frank H.H. Roberts got one, but he was at the Pecos conference and came, and they were there, I guess by September, within a few days after the weekend, and September 4th, I think, is when everybody got there. Alice Hrdlicka, of course, got one. Also at the Smithsonian was William Henry Holmes, and at the Carnegie, at that point, a paleontologist named O.P. Hay, and I have a photograph of his telegram because it was in his papers in the National Archives. I'll put that out. One that's a little more obscure that a lot of people don't know, and I don't believe it's mentioned in anything that's published, is Albert Jenks from the University of Minnesota, who was in fact not in Minnesota where his Western Union telegram went, but he was traipsing around New Mexico with students doing field work in pottery era things. I'm not sure this is a photo of him. There's only a handful of photos of him, but I found this postcard at an antique shop in Bemidji, Minnesota a number of years ago, and it really looks like him. But you'll also notice that on the shelf behind him is the extinct bison horn core. So, yeah, I think it's him, but for now this will be our stand-in for Albert Jenks. And you're probably saying, Albert Jenks, who cares about that? Who is he? Well, it turns out he plays a very interesting role in a lot of the unknown information about the site, and also, contrary to a lot of things that have been published, he initiated the first Fluted Point Survey in America. And it was the forms, and I have one that Sellard's got, had been sent out around the country by 1928. So yeah, he's first. I'll show that in the future video when we get a little farther along. But so there's what? Oh, and of course Barnum Brown, the paleontologist from the American Museum of Natural History. And you probably wondered why in the animated beginning do we have a dinosaur? Well, I just got this in a beer can auction, and I'm very pleased about it. This is Dino, the Sinclair Oil mascot that was trademarked in 1932 when they started sponsoring Barnum Brown's work. And of course, here's an old postcard. This is probably from the 60s, but you can see the dinosaurs on their gas pumps. That was just their shtick for a long, long time. They trademarked it in 1932 and used it for decades. If you ask AI when they did this, the first thing that pops up is that Barnum Brown was designing full-size dinosaurs for displays for the New York's World's Fair in 1964. Except he died in February of 1963. So don't use the AI. You could read a book. You could listen to me. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't recommend that. But or go to some of the other sources that are available, because AI has no idea, and it'll just be frustrating. Here's a little tiny map. I'm trying to hold it still. In the upper left corner where Raton is, Folsom's just outside of that. I'm trying to find a better New Mexico map and put a still in of that. The town, of course, was named for the future wife of Grover Cleveland, Mrs. Frances Folsom. And you probably wondered, what did she look like? Well, there you are. And this is a Pabst beer tonic. And I don't know what this one's for. That doesn't have any advertising on it. But anyway, that's who young Frances Folsom was, and that's who the town's named after. So there's supposed to be 32 or so bison there, and 28 points that have been found over the years. I have now got casts of quite a number of them. I'll talk about a few of them besides the smoking gun. Notice that it's got an ear blown off, a very classic impact fracture kind of thing where the I can't do it. Oh, I broke a finger since I talked to you last. I think I did. That one of the ears is blown off. I think of all 28 points and fragments, they're basically all fragments with 4 exceptions. There's supposed to be, I think, 4 complete, but I think even a couple of those are not quite complete, but massive impact fractures, big bending fractures at the midpoint, just in front of the haft. It's a pretty common form of it. A tip shattered into 3 pieces here. Another big tip. This is actually prepared from 2 or 3 pieces, and what's really interesting and important about this, and I can't quite do it, you can see the little line at the bottom to the just past the tip of my index finger. There is a sliver that was found in place, and so they were able to put that back. They know where that one came from. This is actually a tip. You can see it's starting to taper just a little bit. It took me a while looking at the cast, but the flutes on both sides are traveling that way. So unless they fluted it from the tip, that's a tip. One of the other tips. And then I have a scraper that's really kind of interesting. This was found when some additional work was being done there in August of 1970. So this one's not from the 20s, it's only from 50-some years ago, 55 years ago. And I have another one that I am not sure, because doggone it, Dave made a wonderful table, put information about all of the points, and then showed 21 of them. Come on, man. So I'm not sure. I'm working on trying to figure out where this one's from. That's a real interesting impact damage to the tip, and just blew that out. I'm sure it's a Folsom from Folsom, but I haven't confirmed that yet. I'm working on it. The Hillerman story gets at something that I would argue Dr. Meltzer has incorrect. And it's been repeated an awful lot, and the literature changed. The site is not in Wild Horse Arroyo, it's in Dead Horse Arroyo. And there's very clear, conclusive proof, and there's clear rules of nomenclature that have been utterly disregarded in this case, and that are wrong. They're just flat out wrong. So as far as the use of Dead Horse Arroyo instead of Wild Horse Arroyo, I agree with what Hillerman said, and I think I can prove it based on something that I'm going to have to read to you. It's from a piece that I have in a draft of a manuscript I have that's not yet ready to go, but this part is. So I'm going to just read the important little paragraph here. Sorry to do this. The American Anthropological Association passed a resolution regarding the importance of Folsom at the annual meeting held in Andover, Massachusetts, December 28th to 30th, 1927, so 4 months after the discovery. Article 1 includes the statement, "The American Anthropological Association respectfully urges that a quadrant covering that present unsurveyed site be undertaken at the earliest date by the U.S. Geological Survey in order to establish the geologic age of the deposits in which these remains are found." This is first reported in Hallowell, 1928, on page 542. So the first reference to the site where they actually name it, and there's a number of speakers at the New York Academy meetings in 28, and I'll flip to some pages there and talk about that in a minute, but nobody actually says the location of the site. None of them. Part of the problem is Figgins and Cook are clipped out of the story already at this point. They're not being their own advocates, at least in the big meetings, and that's something that Meltzer is really good at, bringing out that part of the story. So the first published version of it is after some after the New York Anthropological meetings, which I think is in 28. I'd have to make sure I get this date right. The first actual naming of the site, and it's never mentioned in any of the published parts of papers or in any of the publications immediately. It's not until into 28 and 29, and this is, like I say, published in March of 1929. So the rules of nomenclature are very clear. The first published name is the name you use. Barnum Brown's giving the talk. He has Kirk Bryan speaking about the geology, and in this 2-page article, 4 times, 4 says, "Oh, Dead Horse Gulch." So, what is it? I don't know why it changed. It sounds a little nicer. It's less crude. I don't know. But Dead Horse Gulch is actually the name of the site. And I probably need to change what I'm saying from Dead Horse Arroyo to Dead Horse Gulch. I realize in some respects it's a moot point because it's on all the maps now as Wild Horse Arroyo. The Wild Horse Formation is one of the geologic layers that's been published now, and it's essentially it's captured what's going to be said, or what it's going to be published as for now. But the point stands that somebody got it wrong, and it's been perpetuated indefinitely. There's a similar thing that happens in Paleoindian archaeology right now that drives me crazy, with early Paleo-Indian being reassigned from Clovis to everything that is pre-Clovis, which, again, the rules of nomenclature are clear. There's no possible way to stand on this. It doesn't make any sense to do that. We need a different word for it. Now, I don't know what we call all of the pre-Clovis, but redefining Clovis as Middle Paleo-Indian and saying that everything prior to Clovis is early Paleo-Indian is, it's wrong, and it just is going to confuse the heck out of people from now on that are trying to look at it and go, well, why did early Paleo-Indian change? What's the meaning? And of course, there's no justification for it. It's not acceptable by the strict rules of scientific nomenclature. So I think Dead Horse Gulch may be flogging something that's already long gone, but the behavior persists within Paleo-Indian archaeology, and we don't want that. That's no good. So there's a really interesting, parallel in what's going on in terms of finding physical remains in situ in a meaningful context on the very day that people are coming together to work out chronology, relationships between archaeological cultures, and basically just, again, working out using the same language, using the same words to describe things so that people in different areas of the Southwest, in this case, aren't talking past each other, which is really what I'm kind of getting at with the Wild Horse versus Dead Horse Gulch, and the reassignment of early Paleoindian. I have one other minor bone to pick with Dr. Meltzer, and we're going to obfuscate some marginalia because it's not appropriate for everyone to see, but this is a page 47. He has this sphere of who's really influential and important, the elite scientists versus the guys who just showed up with a spade. And I didn't have it up long enough. I think I cut 2 people off at the bottom, but the point here is revise the book and put George McJunkin back in the site that he found, please. Also, Carl Schwankheim found this on August 29th, and I think it's important to give him credit for being the one that unearthed it, because he worked on the site for so long and brought it to the attention of so many people. And I mean, it's his diary that's published in here that shows that and talks about all that. So I think that's an important thing to bring up. Okay, another thing to bring up, or go back to, we'll backtrack just a little bit. Probably not breaking these by throwing them by hand in this fashion. Not every single one of them. And for some reason, the name for this object does not appear in the Folsom book. And these are discussed as being hand-thrown, like javelins, or hand-held thrusting spears. They are not. They are darts. They were launched with an Atlatl. And I don't know why the word does not appear in that book, but it is, I think, an unfortunate oversight at best. This technology existed in Europe at least 14,000 years ago, probably 17,000 years ago, maybe 21 that we could show physical evidence of it. I think that most people think it's been around at least 35, maybe 40,000 years. We have 3 Atlatl hooks made from identifiable elements. 2 of them are ivory from the tusks of mastodon. One is a distal phalange from a paleolama. All 3 are extinct taxa that have been gone for at least 13,000 years. So I think we have a pretty solid case on the physical evidence presence of at least 13,000 years of these. So I don't understand why it's not even considered, because that doesn't make sense. I just don't see bison standing around while you're running up to them and playing tag. I don't buy it. I think it's suicidal. At a minimum, the idea of the use of the Atlatl needs to be discussed, or should be considered. And slowly but surely, I think there are a couple of people that have more molds available. So if I can get the whole assemblage, we'll do a video just on the use of the circumstantial and direct evidence of Atlatl usage at Folsom, because it's clear that there's Atlatls in other Folsom sites as well. There's, in the last decade or so, been some criticism of the veracity or the interpretation of what this picture really means. Lee Lyman, he did it, and it's been repeated by Steve Nash on his blog. And you guys should know better than this. This drives me crazy. So their criticism, this is from one of Marie Wormington's early editions of Ancient Man in North America. The criticism basically focuses on the fact that the articular ends of the ribs are flipped. And I don't have a problem with this at all, and I think if you think about it for a moment, it should come clear that unlike the compressed flat archaeological site or my lovely trade card of an ancient buffalo, it turns out 8-foot-tall bison are not 2-dimensional. They're 3-dimensional. And if you have a rib from the other side, when your 3,000-4,000 pound bison gets squished flat from a rib that was sitting at least a couple feet off the ground in life, if the animal's dead and laying on its side, I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't see the problem with that. I think it's a matter of perception, because it's been squished into 2 dimensions from a 3-dimensional giant animal. And I think if you think about it that way, if you think I'm wrong, I'd love to hear why you think a 3-dimensional bison should lay, how it should actually be squished flat, because I don't think the criticism is valid. I'd love to discuss it. I don't have any problem with that. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I think you need to think of it as a three-dimensional object, not a two-dimensional squished flat archaeological site. So shifting gears, we're going to go back to Albert Jenks for a moment. He didn't get his telegram until several weeks, maybe a couple months after they were sent out, so he completely missed the conference of everyone showing up at the Folsom site. Became a raving lunatic looking for Paleo-Indian sites. Found a number of things in Minnesota, Minnesota Man, Browns Valley Man, working on those sites. Probably, I don't know that he ever really found full-on paleo material or a paleo site of his own, but earliest archaic definitely, and a number of them. He chased all over the world. He, I shouldn't say world, but he did for his own work, but for the Paleo-Indian, or what was then early man stuff, he was at Vero a couple of times after Sellards had been there. A lot of his material from Vero is actually still up in Minnesota in a couple places. A lot of his collections are still at the Minnesota Historical Society. Actually, I should say this, he really was all over the world, because there's actual material from Solutré in France, the Solutrian type site, he managed to acquire and bring back. So, like I said, by 1928, he had made up a form and was collecting data on fluted points. He had a Fluted Point Survey going by 1928. Well, he got, of course, very interested in the site, and this is not in the Folsom book, and this is where I say I'm premature, because a number of years ago, and I probably shouldn't even read this, it'll just make me sad how long I've been delinquent in doing this, but prior to in 2008 or 9, the folks at the American Museum and their archives, anthropology archives, were very generous and very kind, and they've agreed to work with me again now that I've sort of crawled out from under my rock. Jenks, okay, I should start over. People from the Denver Museum, I think it was Colorado Museum, I forget which way it is now. Anyway, the museum in Denver, Figgins and Cook and their crews dug Folsom in 26, maybe did some work there in 25. Then the in situ finds were during their excavations in 27. Barnum Brown brought a crew from the American Museum of Natural History in 1928. And I think he felt that that orange was squeezed at that point. But not good old Dr. Jenks. So he asked everybody up front, he was very, I think, very diplomatic about it, if it would be okay if he came and excavated in 1929. And as near as I can tell, everybody was fine with it. I've not seen anybody say, you know, in all the correspondence that I've looked at from all the archives, anything negative about it. I think it was fine. I think everybody got what they wanted already, so they were willing to let him go. But they produced a map for him at the American Museum, and doggone it, I have my packet that everything was in. I have all of the papers, and the map is missing. So I need to. I've been talking to the American Museum again, and they're going to let me get copies of these things. But when I get that, that'll be an intro to a bigger discussion of a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of the excavation and getting back to the Atlatl issue as I've tried to pick up some more of these casts. So, doggone it, why didn't they dig? Because he didn't dig. It turns out the rancher that was going to put them up had a fire, and I don't know if I think it was his house, and their bunkhouse burned. So Jenks is on his way from the Twin Cities with a crew of students and a fresh map and all his notes, and gets there and they have nowhere to live. And I don't think they wanted to camp out, or it wasn't an option, or they were not going to have any amenities at all. I'm not sure what the issue was beyond the house had burned and there was nothing. So they shuffled off and went into the center part of the state and went looking at later period archaeological sites, pueblos and stuff, lots of pottery. And so it never happened, which is a bummer, because who knows what else might have turned up, particularly if they'd ever found the campsite, because the site is really nothing but the kill site. So this unifacial tool becomes very enigmatic at that point. It's very strange, because there's some flakes, but not much. There aren't any preforms. I grabbed one from Lindenmeyer, just showing that there's just nothing like this going on at Folsom. It really is Robert's work at Lindenmeyer and the material that's found there, that the wealth of bone artifacts and other tools and stuff. I have some material from a couple other sites with Folsom material that I wanted to bring up, and I've got photos inserted. These are the 5 Folsoms, and unfortunately I couldn't find the mold for this. We were making some casts today. I couldn't find this one, so I'll replace it. But it's got a really great impact. Ear blown out, and then a couple of smaller complete examples, and another nice rounded tip one because it's blown out. One of the really interesting things is this guy, and there's a good photo. You can pause and look at that. But that is a spectacular burination of the lateral edge, and they resharpened it pretty heavily going this way, but this side is minimally retouched. It's not quite, it's bifacial, but it's nearly a unifacial repair of that burinated edge. It's a really un-Folsom-y looking thing, but it's making do until they can get to it. Sellards said all 5 of those were in here found displaced or out of a meaningful context. I know Mike Collins has said the same, at least on the Texas Beyond History webpage, and I had to have gotten this from Gene Muir when he would come in and visit us at the Galt Lab. I swear to you, those 5 were found around a bison, that it's essentially the one that got away, much like the Naco mammoth in southeast Arizona with 8 Clovis points. It appears this was the Folsom equivalent of Naco at Kincaid Rock Shelter, where the animal went to the water, the seep there, and perished. So I got to look into more of that, because when I started trying to find what my source was for that, I don't have one. And the only 2 things I found, Sellards and knowing what Mike had said, it doesn't say anything like what I have in my head. So I'll work on that. But it's a very interesting story, and there's something intriguing going on that is definitely worth trying to chase down, which I will. If you've seen my short, I'll mention another thing from Kincaid. This hasn't cured all the way, so I can't break off the edges, but this is the base of the obsidian point that I was talking about in that short, saying why Clovis can't be first, because this thing is made of obsidian, the real one, from 1,000 kilometers, well over 600 miles straight south of Kincaid Rock Shelter. Kincaid Rock Shelter is located about 125 miles straight west of San Antonio, so it's in the middle of Texas, the middle of the continent. I mean, you couldn't really pick a better spot to say middle continent, not just the U.S. But the fact that they've round-tripped 2,000 kilometers up and back, or from somewhere else, and gone 1,000 kilometers carrying this, is screaming. They already know the landscape by the time we recognize them as Clovis, and every time you look at the lithic assemblage that's got exotic material in it, it's screaming. They know the land better than somebody that just got there 50 years ago. It's not working that way. Before I get back to finishing with specific stuff from the Folsom site, I wanted to ask for some help. I bought a number of casts from somebody on eBay a few years ago, and in there were 2 molds. One of them's Clovis or unfluted something. I don't know what it is for sure, but there's something very strange. There was a Sandia point that has never appeared in any publication. I have no record that I can find anywhere. I've never seen or heard from anybody that knows anything about it. So how many of these are out there? How many Sandias that nobody can account for? And I've got a pile of stuff together to do a video on New Mexico stuff about white sands and what that means for all the other very strange early things, like Sandia and Pendejo Cave in particular in New Mexico. There's still photographs. You can pause and look at these as well. But I got all very generously loaned the molds and casts that I made when I worked at Galt years ago, and now today just started pouring some. But there were some casts. This one's bronze, and I admit I haven't looked at it real close. I don't know I think it's Folsom, really heavily resharpened, not a Clovis. And then I got 5 more here. If you know where these are from or what site they are, please let me know, because they're not in Jeb Taylor's book, they're not in Sellard's, they're not in any of Wormington's, so they're not from, as near as I can tell, any of the big famous sites. I don't know, I need to look at Shifting Sands better, but for the life of me, I have no clue where this came from, and it drives me crazy. So if you don't mind helping out, I'd sure appreciate it. Alright, our big finish with Folsom, the site. I know I took some shots at Dr. Meltzer, and I mean no offense certainly, but there are some things that I do disagree with, and the fact that George McJunkin got cut out of his own thing is no good, and we really ought to at least talk about the Atlatl as a means of dispatching bison when they all pile up and you have shattered points and nothing but shattered points. There's really a lot that is not told about the site, and a lot of it is going to require flipping over rocks and looking at what's under them. And some of that's genealogical. I've found some old emails I've got printed out of some people that helped me with some of George McJunkin's genealogical tracings. And for some reason in the early 70s, George's story really hit popular imagination. And George McJunkin is the ex-slave from Texas, who is a very well-respected cowboy. I hate it, universally loved by pretty much everybody that knew him, as near as I can tell. That really does come out in the book, in the discussions about George, in Dave Meltzer's book, in a lot of the other popular pieces. Frank Folsom wrote a book about it long ago. George Agagino has a couple of interesting articles. And for some reason, in the early 70s, and if you ever see, like on eBay, somebody selling an article about George McJunkin, it took me forever to do this. But the winter 71 issue of New Mexico magazine, the April 72 of True Frontier, and the winter 73 of Old West have those articles come from these magazines. It took me forever to figure that out, looking at images and being irritated. I didn't want to pay 25 bucks for an article when you can get the magazines for 10 bucks. But if you, and plus I wanted the original whole thing. There's a lot, not just genealogy, but some of his story in particular, and I have not yet found this, but this is some more archival work, which would be a spectacular thing to find. Agagino says, and actually wrote one of these articles, both of them with Frank Folsom. They say that George McJunkin wrote letters to various museums after he made the initial finds after the big flood in 1908. And so somewhere out there might actually be letters written by George McJunkin. And I think that would be a spectacular thing to find in time for the Centennial celebration of the discovery of what ends up being a watershed moment in American archaeology on August 29th, 1927. So, on August 29th, 2027, I'm officially announcing I'm roasting a buffalo. We're going to have a whole bison cooked, and I don't know if it's going to be here on the farm. Might have actually really nice place in Monticello, Florida, with the Osceola Research Institute folks that I work with. Might have a really nice place to do it right there. I need a line on a bison, so if you have a cookable bison, let me know. I probably shouldn't cook it myself. I can do the parts, but I don't know how to do a whole one. So, but we're going to have a dang party. And we're going to have a good party. And I promise you, I have some more surprises about the site and some interesting information. And it'll be fun. We'll probably, I don't know, give away books or something, and make it a big, like I say, make it a big party. I think it should be something really fun, and especially if there's really more information about George McJunkin out there. There's clearly more about the site. The Albert Jenks story has a lot more information of what he tried to gather by asking people that had worked at the site and taking notes, and also getting information from Nels Nelson and of course, Barnum Brown at the American Museum. So this is, again, one of those things, the deeper you dig, there's more interesting information hidden away, and it's science. Here's where we are. It's as smart as we've ever been, but it's also as dumb as we're ever going to be. So we'll keep slugging and keep trying to find things out. And if you know where my Sandias or Folsoms are from, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, and thanks for watching. Please subscribe and hit that like button.